In today's photo deconstruction, I'm going to show you how I use a single umbrella to create sculpted and dramatic checkerboard lighting. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here, and I love to show photographers that if you know what you're doing with lighting, even a single strobe can create really beautiful sculpted results. And that's what I want to show you today. In today's photo deconstruction, I'm going to show you how I use a single umbrella to create something called checkerboard lighting. All right, so first let me break down what checkerboard lighting means. Checkerboard lighting is a term that's commonly been used that defines when something has a highlight side of the face against a shadow side of the background, and the shadow side of the face against the highlight side of the background. What that means is it's black, white, hence checkerboard. Now the image that I'm showing you here was a portrait that I made during my studio lighting bootcamp workshops. This is one of my hands-on workshops where I really show photographers how much control they can have over a single strobe. And then we build and add second and third, but as you can see, even a single strobe can create amazing results. All right, so let's actually pop over and look behind the scenes of our setup. All right, so to begin with, let's talk a little bit about the basics. On the left-hand side of the frame, I have a single strobe, ProPhoto D2, with a large umbrella with diffusion. Now, why did I choose this light source? In this case, I wanted light that would be really beautiful on his skin, soft, forgiving, wrapping across the scene. And so a large umbrella with diffusion helps me achieve that. But I could have had a 3-foot Octabox, I could have had a 3x4-foot softbox. It would have given me similar results, just different shapes to the catch lights. And one of the things that you'll notice about this shot is that the umbrella is feathered across the scene. I've actually changed the direction of the light so that it's pointing across the subject. So very little light is hitting the background. This is part of what is going to allow me to reduce the light from the background, which will give me a little bit of that checkerboard effect. So in doing so, by feathering, I make the left-hand side of the frame darker. But it wasn't quite dark enough. And so that's where you see the second part of the equation added into the scene, which is a black V-flat. That black V-flat goes in between the light and the background, and it casts a shadow on the background. So in other words, you can see that the light on the left-hand side of his face is brighter. Then behind him on the left is dark. Then now look at the right-hand side of his face. It's dark on his face, but lighter on the background. That's exactly what I wanted. The highlight, shadow. Now, by the way, the V-flat that I have here is a full-length V-flat, but they actually make smaller portable V-flats, and the company that makes them is called V-Flat World. I find these to be very useful, especially if you're not working in a space with really large ceilings. All right, now a couple other pieces to the equation here. The background that I have is a gravity backdrop. It's a hand-painted canvas background, and this is a warm gray with a heavy texture. The reason I selected this background is because I was inspired by one of my favorite photographers who use checkerboard lighting all the time. So Irving Penn, if you look at his work, specifically his portraiture, over and over and over again used this sculpted light. Now sometimes it was from artificial lighting, strobes like you see here, but often he would sculpt just the natural light. The way that he would kind of angle the subject towards the window or put something up to create a shadow on the background. So just keep in mind, yes, this can be done with strobes. It could be done with multiple lights, but it could also even be done with window light. All right, so now I've created sculpting, drama, a lot of shape to this scene, but let's take a look at what was captured in camera and then compare it to where I ended up with my post-processing. Okay, so when I was shooting tethered into Capture One, and you could be shooting tethered into Lightroom. But as I was shooting, I also wanted to play around with the color a little bit. Looking at this image, I really like the light, I like the tonalities, but I thought maybe I could add a little bit more contrast if I were playing around with just color, if I wasn't going to do black and white. And one of the ways I could play with contrast is if the skin is warm and then maybe the shadows are cooler. That creates a contrast in tone. So my original color grade, what I did is I popped the clarity and the highlights a little bit. So you see the skin goes a little bit smoother, a little bit shinier. And I desaturated the shot overall. So the shot gets a little less color, and then I added a little bit of coolness to the shadows. So you see how his face seems to pop out from the background even more, even though I'm not really changing the lighting. So again, popping the highlights, a little more contrast, and adding coolness to the shadows. So then I looked at the shot and I like it as is, but there's a couple of things I wanted to change. So first and foremost, it was driving me crazy that I cut off his elbow on the left-hand side. So I decided that I was going to grab his elbow from a different shot and bring that in. But I liked this expression in this pose, so I wanted to keep that. And then overall, even though I used a soft light source on my subject, there's some inconsistencies to the color and texture of his skin. So this is what I did with cleanup. I kind of smooth things out. And I ended up desaturating just a little bit more because I wanted to go even more moody, even more mysterious. And so this is where I ended up for my color version. I think I could have done a warmer version. It would also have worked. And so that's kind of the point of color grading, right? It's what mood are you trying to achieve? There's no right or wrong answer. So this is what I went with for color. But I also know if I look at the classics, the masters of portrait photography doing checkerboard lighting, most of the time it is in black and white. And the reason that it's often in black and white is because that really emphasizes the difference in tonality, right? You see the difference between highlight and shadow more when you remove the color out of the equation. You're just paying attention to that contrast. So what I did is I went in, converted to black and white, popped the highlights, popped the contrast, and it gave him this beautiful silvery texture to the skin. And I think it gives more of a timeless look to this shot. This is probably a little bit more of what I was going with originally, but I wanted you to see that you could do a version in color. Checkerboard lighting is not something specifically only relegated to black and whites. So I love this shot because of the lighting, because of the contrast, and notice he never blends in with the background. The highlight side of the face pops out because the background behind it is darker, and the shadow side of the face pops out and has contrast and definition and shape because the background behind it is lighter. And I think the texture on the background is a nice complement to the texture of the jacket while also paying homage or being inspired by photographers like Irving Penn. Just a couple other notes that I want to make about checkerboard lighting is it doesn't have to be done with soft light. You could use a bare bulb, you could use a hard light modifier, a beauty dish, or a softbox. Softbox, of course, will be softer on the skin, but a harder light modifier would give you more definition to that shadow on the background, which might be a little bit easier to see the checkerboard lighting effect. Now, if you want to learn more about working with one light, everything from sculpting the light to the modifier choice, distance of light, and then creative techniques with a single light source, you're definitely going to want to check out my class, One Light Artistry. And in this class, I go in depth on all of these concepts. One of the things I love about the class is the images that we create are not boring. They're exciting. It's about the artistry that you can achieve when you're using a single strobe. It doesn't have to fit into what is expected for a portrait, especially if you know what you can make with a single light. Now, if you want to see the gear used in the making of the image that I talked about here, be sure to check out the links in the description below and visit adorama.com. And of course, if you want to see my tutorials, you can visit learnwithlindsay.com. And if you want to see more photo deconstructions just like this one, be sure to like and subscribe. See you next time, guys.